Welcome to the Caribbean Development Bank's 2026 Annual News Conference. We are broadcasting live from the Frank Collymore Hall in Bridgetown, Barbados. I am Camille Taylor, Head of Corporate Communications at the CDB. I'll be moderating today's proceedings. A warm welcome to members of the media, those joining us in person and those online. This annual news conference is a pillar of our commitment to ongoing dialogue with the people, governments, institutions, and communities of the region. It's an opportunity for us to report on our stewardship and to provide policy guidance and technical prescriptions that are needed to accelerate the region's development. Our theme is building resilience to safeguard Caribbean futures. Therefore, the conversation you'll hear this morning is about charting a path forward that is grounded in strategic vision and responsive to economic realities. Mr. Daniel Best, our president, will open. He will speak on building tomorrow's Caribbean, a transformative agenda for regional resilience. Mr. Best will outline the bank's 10-year vision and strategic plan. This is our roadmap for delivering the resilient Caribbean we're committed to building. Mr. Jason Cotton, our acting Deputy Director of Economics, follows with driving growth, 2025 economic outcomes, and the 2026 outlook. He will review the region's economic performance in 2025 and outline this year's projections. He will also prescribe the policy approaches needed to build the economic foundation to achieve greater prosperity. Then, Mr. O'Reilly Lewis, our Director of Projects, will speak on delivering impact, project performance, and strategic priorities. He will show how CDB's work is translating into real improvements across Caribbean societies. Next, Ms. Valerie Isaacs, our Division Chief for Environmental Sustainability, will deal with countering crisis, accelerating climate action for resilience, because without climate action, there is no secure future for this region. Finally, President Best will close. Following the presentations, we'll open the floor for questions from the media. Now, please welcome our president, Mr. Daniel Best.
Thank you, Camille. Colleagues and friends, good morning. Today I will speak about where we stand and the future unfolding before us. We are living through a structural shift defined by heightened geopolitical tensions, technological acceleration, climate volatility, and reconfigured global supply chains. These forces are reshaping how countries grow, compete, and secure their futures. For the Caribbean, they converge into what I have called the decade of decision. Will we become architects of our own resilience or remain exposed to external shocks in a world that is increasingly selective and unforgiving? Even before recent turbulence intensified, we projected that between 2024 and 2033, the Caribbean would require a gross financing need of US $65.2 billion to prevent stagnation. Achieving true resilience, climate adaptation, stronger infrastructure, and fiscal buffers could double that figure. Add inevitable external shocks and higher growth ambitions, and the need escalates further. Our region has made measurable strides towards the Sustainable Development Goals, but in some areas, momentum has stalled. In others, reversed. At the current pace, 2030 will pass before we even meet them. The decade ahead cannot be financed or governed at yesterday's scale. The decisions we take today will ultimately determine whether 20 million Caribbean futures are protected or placed at risk. what does this new era demand of the Caribbean Development Bank? Do we operate with an outdated model or scale for a more complex and volatile era? We have boldly chosen to scale. Last year, I called for a rebirth of this institution. That commitment is now in motion. In February, our board approved the strategic plan for 2026 to 2035, providing a clear mandate that aligns the institution for the decade ahead. This plan is our North Star. It is built on rigorous scenario planning and stress tested against multiple futures, so we remain agile and prepared. It is anchored in an integrated resilience framework built on three interconnected pillars. First, social resilience. We are strengthening our people's ability to withstand shocks and still advance. Poverty, inequality, gaps in education and healthcare, natural hazards, youth unemployment, and migration continue to strain Caribbean households. Our focus is on ensuring reliable access to essential services, reducing extreme poverty, and delivering social protection that is responsive, inclusive, and grounded in dignity. Second, economic resilience. For us, economic resilience means supporting our countries so they can absorb multiple shocks while sustaining inclusive growth. We are shaping a more diverse, competitive Caribbean, powered by climate-resilient infrastructure, strong fiscal systems, digital connectivity, secure food systems, a vibrant cultural sector, and a private sector driving greener, innovation-led growth. Third is environmental resilience. In this region, environmental resilience is existential. It means strengthening our capacity to thrive while protecting our people, economies, and ecosystems from escalating climate and disaster risks. So we are advancing green opportunities and a nature-positive, climate-resilient, low-carbon region where stewardship fuels prosperity and reduces risks. How will we deliver on these objectives? By focusing on three operational priorities: youth, institutions, and climate action. Youth, because half our population is under 30, giving us a demographic advantage as global labor markets age. Our investments will expand opportunities, build skills and entrepreneurship, and position young people as development drivers. Ladies and gentlemen, we will also focus on strengthening the region's institutions. We all know resilient societies depend on capable, accountable institutions. Yet too often, procurement delays, fragmented implementation, and weak fiscal management continue to slow development. We will strengthen institutions to improve service delivery, reinforce policy frameworks, and build long-term credibility. Our focus on climate requires no justification. The region needs roughly US $14 billion annually for climate response, but mobilizes less than 10% of that. At the bank, we are committing 30% of our total financing and 35% of our Special Development Fund resources to adaptation and mitigation across the Caribbean. Gender equality, innovation, digital transformation, and regional integration will underpin every intervention, advancing inclusion and shared prosperity across our work. And no member country will be left behind. This is our promise to Haiti. We are strengthening our Haiti country office, supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises, renewable energy, and advancing disaster risk management because resilience in Haiti strengthens resilience across the Caribbean. This strategic plan is also a blueprint for CDB's internal reform agenda, designed to deliver greater scale, speed, and impact. We are enhancing country engagement, making it easier to work with the bank while identifying bottlenecks in real time and strengthening our tracking of results. Friends, we recognize that CDB alone cannot address the region's needs. Therefore, we are deepening our collaboration with regional institutions while working more closely with other multilateral development banks on joint planning, investment, advisory services, and policy dialogue. We are unlocking the full force of the private sector, positioning it as a central engine of the region's resilience and development. We are also strengthening knowledge leadership through the CDB Academy, a platform for capacity building and knowledge exchange. This will support member countries in designing bankable projects and advancing evidence-based solutions and policymaking. And our members have been clear. They expect 4 things from the bank: scale, alignment, catalytic capital, measurable resilience. And that transformation is already underway. In my first year as president, we strengthened the bank's capital position and expanded our lending capacity by raising 100 million Swiss francs on the Swiss market and executing a US $450 million exposure exchange agreement. We also launched our trade finance guarantee program for small and micro enterprises to help de-risk support to MSMEs. And when Hurricane Melissa struck Jamaica, we were part of a global partnership of major development institutions that coordinated a US $6.7 billion recovery financing package at speed. Year 1 was about repositioning this bank for the decade ahead. To move forward, we must scale our financing strategy to match our ambition. This is why we are pursuing a comprehensive resource mobilization strategy to expand capacity, lower funding costs, optimize capital, deepen partnerships, and scale thematic finance. Soon, we will launch a Euro medium-term note program, enabling up to US $1 billion in issuance over 3 years. This will lower the cost of capital and unlock the private investment our region needs to grow. And we are moving from a position of strength. Fitch recently reaffirmed our AA+ credit rating with a stable outlook, reflecting prudent risk management and strong capital adequacy. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is becoming more complex, more unpredictable, and more demanding with every passing day. But moments of complexity are also moments of opportunity. Moments when bold leadership matters most. We no longer have the luxury of time because the choices we make today will echo across the next generation. This is why at the Caribbean Development Bank, we have embraced a profound transformation. We are strengthening our agility so we can respond faster. We are deepening our engagement so that countries, communities, and generations feel the full benefits of our interventions. And we are elevating our delivery because the people of the Caribbean deserve nothing less than excellence. I thank you. I will now hand over to Mr. Jason Cotton, our Acting Deputy Director of the Economics Department, to present the 2025 Regional Economic Performance and 2026 Outlook. Thank you.
Colleagues, partners, and friends of the Caribbean Development Bank, good morning. The year 2025 was a reminder of a familiar reality for the Caribbean. Small, open economies remain highly exposed to external shocks. What is more concerning in this moment is the persistence of uncertainty and the narrowing room for policy error. Today, I will take a closer look at how the Caribbean economy performed in 2025, outline our outlook for 2026, and highlight a few priorities that will be critical to strengthening resilience. Let me begin with a broad picture of economic performance in 2025. Last year was more challenging for the Caribbean region, as global conditions became less supportive and downside risk materialized. Excluding Guyana, regional growth decelerated to 0.6% from 1.4% in 2024, as several economies recorded weaker growth or contractions. In contrast, Guyana's growth decelerated from the exceptionally high rates recorded in 2024, but remained robust, with the economy still expanding at a double-digit pace. As a result, when Guyana is included, regional growth rose to 4.7%. Outcomes varied across other countries. Among commodity exporters, economic activity in Suriname accelerated, partly reflecting continued oil-related investment, while Trinidad and Tobago experienced muted growth. Service exporting economies expanded more slowly as tourism momentum eased. Once again, climate shocks weighed heavily on performance. Hurricane Melissa struck Jamaica while it was still recovering from Hurricane Beryl, pushing the economy into a second consecutive year of contraction. There was, however, some relief on inflation. In line with global trends, price pressures eased across most economies, with regional inflation falling to an average of 3.4% from its 2022 peak of 9.7%. Labor market conditions also improved in several countries, with lower unemployment and higher participation, though disparities remain especially among youth and women. On the fiscal side, consolidation gains achieved in the post-pandemic period stalled in a number of borrowing member countries. Excluding Guyana, the regional primary surplus narrowed to 1.3% of GDP as expenditure growth outpaced revenue. Higher recurrent expenditure, climate-related shocks, temporary tax relief measures, and volatile non-tax inflows all contributed to the weakening. In Guyana, a substantial expansion in capital spending resulted in a sizable primary deficit. Consequently, when Guyana is included, the regional primary surplus narrows to 0.2% of GDP. While the regional central government debt ratio declined slightly to 46.6%, underlying vulnerabilities persist. Debt levels remain elevated in several economies, with central government debt still above 60% of GDP in 9 countries. Notably, in few cases, fiscal responsibility frameworks helped contain deterioration by enabling orderly adjustment to climate shocks through escape clauses. Turning now to 2026. Growth across the Caribbean is expected to remain modest. Excluding Guyana, regional GDP is forecasted to grow by 1.1%. Guyana is expected to expand by over 20%, lifting regional growth to 6.2% when included. Among other commodity exporters, prospects remain mixed, with growth outcomes closely tied to commodity price trends and production dynamics. Service exporting economies are anticipated to record modest growth, largely hinging on tourism and construction. Inflation dynamics in 2026 will be shaped by developments in global commodity markets. On the fiscal front, some countries will continue consolidating and strengthening revenue administration. However, pressures from post-disaster recovery, rising wage costs, and declining citizenship by investment revenues persist. In several cases, these pressures have led to deviations from medium-term debt reduction paths and require fiscal adjustment to realign with established debt targets and preserve sustainability. That said, risks remain on the downside. Global uncertainty, geopolitical tensions, both globally and within the Caribbean basin, and climate-related shocks continue to cloud the outlook. Fiscal risk also remain pronounced, particularly in highly indebted countries with limited buffers. At the same time, stronger than expected tourism outturns, accelerated investment, progress on the renewable energy transition, and accelerated reforms to the business environment could improve medium-term prospects. This brings me to the development imperatives. In the Caribbean's recent history, one external shock has followed another, each one underscoring how exposed small open economies remain. This year, beyond the shocks themselves, uncertainty has become more deeply entrenched. This reality makes regional cooperation not just desirable, but absolutely essential. In a more uncertain and fragmented world, vulnerability is magnified when countries act alone, but together we are more resilient. It is equally important to emphasize that we are not without agency. External conditions matter, but they do not fully determine outcomes. The policy choices we make, the institutions we build, and the societies we shape will continue to influence the region's path. This points to several clear development imperatives. First, we must improve implementation. Good plans and secured financing mean little without delivery. Implementation must match ambition. Second, we must diversify. Over-reliance on single industries leaves us exposed. More competitive, private sector-led economies are essential to lasting resilience. Third, we must build resilience by design. Invest upfront in stronger infrastructure, strengthen disaster risk financing, and ensure our social systems can respond when shocks strike. Fourth, we must strengthen fiscal institutions and safeguard debt sustainability. Wider adoption of well-designed fiscal responsibility frameworks will further strengthen policy credibility. And finally, resilience is about people. Equip them with skills, expand decent work, and unlock their productive potential. That is the foundation of sustainable growth. Taken together, these initiatives underscore a simple but powerful point. Resilience is built through credible policy choices, through stronger institutions, disciplined execution, investment in our people, and through regional solidarity. If we rise to meet this moment, we will not only withstand shocks, we will shape a more stable, more inclusive, and more sustainable Caribbean. Thank you. I now invite Mr. O'Reilly Lewis, Director of Projects, to take us through the bank's project performance and the strategic priorities shaping our work. Mr. Lewis.
Colleagues, friends, today I will highlight interventions financed by the Caribbean Development Bank that delivered meaningful results across our Caribbean communities. In 2025, we expanded our financing significantly. We approved a total of 464 million United States dollars, a 50% increase over 2024, and disbursed $429 million, a 30% increase over 2024. This financing unlocks stronger services, safer infrastructure, cleaner energy, and more resilient economies in an uncertain world. These investments are strategic interventions designed to protect development gains and build regional resilience. Across the Caribbean, CDB continues to support the transformation of our region, from energy security to climate-ready infrastructure, from water systems to world-class airports. These new investments represent commitments to stronger economies, empowered people, and a Caribbean that is ready to compete on a global stage. The following are key projects approved in 2024. $27 million to Belize Electricity Services for the 8th Power Project to modernize its electricity grid to benefit approximately 114,000 households and commercial customers. $30 million for water supply improvement in the Bahamas, which will enhance access to approximately 5,000 people in the Family Islands. Also in the Bahamas, $6 million will be used to establish the Bahamas Polytechnic and Accreditation Training Hub, so that over 800 secondary school graduates and other youth can be certified in industry-aligned skills training. $47 million to improve climate resilience at the Canouan Airport, which will support tourism development across the Grenadines. $8.7 million for the Grenada Battery Energy Storage System, which will enable grid stability and reduce fossil fuel reliance, supporting energy security and lowering electricity costs to over 90% of the population in Grenada. $47 million for the Barbados Grantley Adams International Airport Expansion Project, which will enhance operational efficiency, doubling passenger throughput capacity. Despite a prolonged period of turbulence, Haiti remains a nation of extraordinary potential, rich in talent, culture, and untapped opportunity. CDB remains committed to making these targeted interventions that build a more hopeful future for the Haitian people. The Quality Enhancement Education Project was completed in 2025. This project supported over 17,000 students in primary and secondary school, 50% of which were girls. Through a climate-resilient agriculture intervention, 250 farmers were trained, 48% of whom were women, and a new 23.5-hectare irrigation scheme was implemented. In energy, our solar power project in Haiti will provide access to customers in 3 rural municipalities and benefit over 2,000 customers by transitioning them to sustainable renewable energy. For more than 4 decades, the Basic Needs Trust Fund program has stood as the bank's flagship community development program, bringing tangible change to the people who need it most. Under BNTF 10, that mission continued with renewed purpose, delivering impactful projects across the region and setting the stage for an even more ambitious new cycle. In the 10th cycle, we delivered 92 sub-projects across 9 participating countries. An excellent example of our impact is in Guyana, where BNTF partnered with the government to build and equip the first special education needs school in the Essequibo region too. This facility now serves children with disabilities from nursery to secondary level, offering a safe, inclusive environment. In 2025, a new BNTF 11 program cycle was approved with a commitment of $53.6 million. This program will be implemented over the next 4 years across 10 participating countries. CDB continued to prioritize the private sector development as essential for driving sustainable growth. CDB's DigiLab Finance Program, delivered with the International Financing Corporation and the Caribbean Association of Banks, benefited over 3 million people by enhancing data analytics and financial services, while reducing lending bias and costs across 10 institutions. The Cultural and Creative Industries Innovation Fund also expanded, supporting over 200 participants across 14 countries and awarding grants to 12 micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Our C-Trades Caribbean Regional Hub supported over 1,300 women-owned businesses through training, market access, and technical assistance. Moving to knowledge leadership, at a time when development challenges are becoming more complex and interconnected, CDB continued to lead with ideas that shape the regional agenda. We brought regional and international partners together to share solutions and address common development challenges. Through dialogue across education, gender equality, risk management, and sustainable infrastructure, we collectively explored how financial innovation, climate-responsive approaches, and stronger institutional capacity can accelerate development outcomes. As we move into the future, the bank will continue to focus on our core sectors, including transport, water and sanitation, education, and sustainable energy. We will strengthen our focus on resilience and the increased use of technology as a catalyst for improved efficiency of service delivery. We will continue to work assiduously to improve our project implementation and delivery. Our work in diagnosing implementation capacity challenges will therefore be critical, ensuring that countries not only design transformative projects, but also implement them effectively. Together, with our partners and the communities we serve, we will continue to deliver results that strengthen resilience and create lasting opportunity for our Caribbean people. Thank you. I now hand it over to Ms. Valerie Isaac, the Division Chief of the Environmental Sustainability Division, who will speak to us about our work in climate resilience.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Today I will outline the Caribbean Development Bank's continuing work to strengthen resilience against climate change and disasters, share more information about our achievements in 2025 and our plans for 2026 and beyond. The Caribbean remains one of the most vulnerable regions globally. In less than a decade, 5 Category 5 hurricanes have stress-tested our borrowing member countries, most recently Hurricane Melissa in 2025. These extreme weather events have compounding impacts. They disrupt our economies, devastate infrastructure, destroy lives and livelihoods, inflate debt burdens, and obstruct the path to sustainable development. Climate change intensifies these events. The climate crisis is therefore not simply a challenge. It is an existential threat to our development and well-being, particularly for the most vulnerable people. Consequently, CDB takes a holistic approach to climate resilience and provides concessional finance, technical support, and thought leadership necessary to translate policy into people-centered, bankable investments. And our commitment is quantifiable. You heard the President mention our annual climate finance targets and our plans to increase those targets by 2027. In 2025, our climate finance commitments reached $226.7 million, or approximately 50% of total project approvals. This value, ladies and gentlemen, is almost double that of 2024, driven by 3 large policy-based operations to Guyana, Dominica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The operations will build the institutional, technical, and financial capacity that these countries need to anticipate, withstand, and recover from disasters, and to strengthen their national systems for biodiversity protection, climate adaptation, and water resources management. In addition, in 2025, through the European Union-funded Caribbean Action for Resilience Enhancement Program, CDB approved $1.2 million in grant financing for a regional project to build resilience in water utilities and a project to improve climate-smart livelihoods in 10 communities in Belize. And our Climate Change Project Preparation Fund became fully operational. The fund is specifically designed to address the pipeline bottlenecks that historically inhibit capital flows. Our borrowing member countries can now access financing to prepare projects that are ready to be financed by CDB and other partners. In 2025, we secured $54 million from the Green Climate Fund through 2 primary vehicles. First, the Integrated Utility Services Program to scale up investments in energy efficiency and distributed energy resources such as rooftop solar in Barbados, Belize, and Jamaica. Through the IUS program, approximately $27 million in grant and loan financing from the GCF, combined with contributions from CDB and national partners, will leverage an investment of over $68 million. Second, the Caribbean Hydrometeorological and Multi-Hazard Early Warning Services Project. The $27 million in grant resources will upgrade forecasting systems in Belize and Trinidad and Tobago, thus protecting the lives and livelihoods of 1.8 million people. In 2026, our momentum will accelerate. Some key milestones include financing projects supporting water sector resilience in our borrowing member countries, finalizing a regional blue economy program valued at approximately $200 million to protect our oceans while creating new jobs related to the marine sector. Launching a flagship regional platform to catalyze climate action and synchronize national energy and transport priorities into actionable investment portfolios. And regional program to advance locally led climate action. We will complete the update of our climate resilience strategy to align with the bank's newly approved 10-year strategic plan, and that will ensure that our climate strategy remains relevant to our clients' adaptation priorities. As we forge ahead, we will continue to innovate and transform, strengthen our own capacity and that of our borrowing member countries, accelerate the development of investment-ready pipelines, mobilize climate and disaster finance at scale, deepen strategic partnerships, and advance coordinated regional climate action. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, resilience is neither an option nor a luxury. It is a fundamental requirement for regional growth and stability. The decisions and actions we take today will dictate the Caribbean's development trajectory for the next half-century. CDB remains committed to being a primary catalyst for this resilient path. I invite the President to have the final word. Thank you.
Friends, you have heard from Mr. Cotton about the current economic situation and prospects for our region. You listened as Mr. Lewis shared some of the transformational work we are doing across our region and the lives we are impacted. Ms. Isaac shared how the bank is supporting our region to respond to the impact of the climate crisis. I now invite you to join me in imagining a Caribbean in 2035 that seized this decisive decade. Imagine our Caribbean is recognized as one of the world's most resilient regions because our systems evolved and our strategy remained disciplined. In St. Lucia, a young woman leads a climate technology company exporting advanced adaptation solutions to global markets. She built it in a region that invested deliberately in digital infrastructure, technical education, and access to venture capital, and made a strategic decision that talent would no longer be its primary export. In Tobago, a young man with disabilities scales a regional fintech platform because financial systems were redesigned, capital markets deepened, risk frameworks modernized, and bias systemically removed. Across the region, early warning systems are integrated, building codes are harmonized, disaster risk financing scaled and pooled, digital public administration is interoperable. Public institutions operate with efficiency and accountability. Policy frameworks are predictable and communities are safer. This is the future we are building. You see, in 1969, our founders built an institution because the global system failed to meet our reality. In 2026, we are scaling that institution with credibility and ambition. History will not remember the turbulence, but whether we rose to meet the moment. And my friends, I assure you, the Caribbean Development Bank will be counted among those who rose to this moment. I thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers for those comprehensive and inspiring presentations. So members of the media, we now turn it over to you. We're inviting your questions. Representatives in the hall, please raise your hand and our ushers will bring the microphone to you. Journalists online, please raise your virtual hand and wait to be called. Now, once you're acknowledged, you can unmute, turn on your camera. Online journalists, you can also drop your question in the chat and I'll ask it on your behalf. We now open the floor for questions.
Good morning. I'm Karina Bennett, business reporter from the Jamaica Observer. My first question goes to you, Mr. Cotton. It is in relation to the projected growth for 2026. What we're seeing now in the US and Iran, the conflict adds real-time external risk to the Caribbean. I know it's early days, but I wanted to get comments from you on your take on the potential impacts this could have for the Caribbean, and worst case scenario, what could we see in terms of impact on the projected growth of, I believe you said 1.1% without Guyana and a little over 2% with Guyana, right?
So, very pertinent question at this point in time. And, when we provided the growth projections, we did acknowledge that there's considerable uncertainty, considerable downside risk. Now, in terms of the conflict with Iran, what we've already seen is that there has been an uptick in commodity prices, higher than we have seen in the recent past. And what that would mean is that for our commodity exporting countries, that would be a positive upside because, of course, they export commodities. But the majority of our member countries are service exporting countries. And as a result, that increase in prices would have implications on inflation, it would have implications on growth, it would have implications potentially on tourism demand. But I think that there still is a lot of uncertainty. So what we do expect is that if it persists, there would be upside and downside risk, but I think we need to wait to see how this situation continues to evolve.
Okay, no problem. The second question that I have goes to Mr. Best. The Caribbean has recovered in headline growth terms, which we've seen, small but recovery. But what we see still is that many households are struggling. They feel pressure from the high cost of living, repeated climate shocks that we've been talking about. And what I want to know really is whether the CBD thinks that what we're seeing now in terms of growth, is it genuinely the region strengthening economically, or are there vulnerabilities still beneath the surface? So, in short, is the recovery really structural or cyclical?
And you're sure you didn't want to ask the economist that question?
Well, I mean...
No, it's fine. I think that, obviously I'm returning from a week in St. Kitts where I spent time with our heads of government. And I returned from St. Kitts somewhat buoyed in terms of the ambition and the direction that the region is moving in. I think that there is a commitment by our leaders, and we see that in the types of projects that they have been approaching us for. So if I could just hark back to the first question, because I think the two are related as it relates to the urgency of this moment and how the Caribbean needs to respond to ensure that, as you put it, the shift is actually structural and sustained. I just wanted to lay out three quick projects that Mr. Lewis would have spoken to. The first, of course, is the Dominica Geothermal Project, where later funded by the Caribbean Development Bank with support from the Government of Canada. Later this year, that project will come on stream as a 10-megawatt initiative, which will provide, I think it's somewhere in the region of 60% of Dominica's energy needs. Now, I want to also jump to Nevis, where we are supporting the exploration of geothermal on the island of Nevis with a potential upside of around 17 megawatts. Now, this is more than what Nevis can actually supply. So there is the potential for the sale of energy to other member countries. And then finally, in December of last year, our board approved a $1.5 million technical assistance to explore interconnection of grids across the region. Why am I speaking about this? Because that conflict in Iran will have a direct impact, as Mr. Cotton just said, commodity prices. It's oil prices, but economists like to use fancy words. It's oil prices we speaking about here. And that directly impacts the energy that our citizenry will be paying for, which directly impacts businesses, et cetera. Now, if we in the Caribbean Development Bank can continue to provide financing that is concessional, the Nevis Geothermal Project, for instance, is fabulously innovative in that it's a contingent recoverable grant. It does not, once the resource is proven and they start to generate energy, it converts to a loan. If the resource isn't proven, it remains a grant. What that means is they can discover this resource without impairing the debt overhang in countries, which of course then redounds to the citizenry and to small businesses and to businesses in general, hence positively impacting their cost of living and ensuring that the structural shift that you spoke to is in fact sustainable. So these are the types of initiatives that we are putting in place to maintain the growth that we are seeing. Thank you.
Clive Compton, St. Vincent the Grenadines. A few months ago, a politician, a former leader of one of the smaller island developing countries, he spoke about a lot of delays in the CDBs, the way they respond to applications. And you yourself, Mr. Best, in your presentation, you also spoke about delays. Is anything being strategically done to ensure that some of these delays don't happen?
Yeah, thank you for that. Look, the central pillar of the rebirth vision of the bank is transform, innovate, transform, thrive, right? And why is that there? Why is it central? Because, you know, it's easy to look outward and talk about what our countries need to do and how they need to innovate. And it's easy, perhaps, to even talk about thrive and how we will measure it. The hard part for a bank, for an institution, for us as individuals, is looking in the mirror and determining, look, this is what we're not getting right. And that is what we have done at the bank and what we have started. We've started on a path of reform, looking at all of the project cycles. We are currently undergoing a governance review assessment. We're currently undergoing a MOPAN, which is Multilateral Organization Program for Assessment Network, looking at all of our systems, but also led by our Office of the Vice President of Operations, we're doing a complete implementation diagnostic of the bank and of our borrowing member countries, determining where these bottlenecks are, where the pain points lie. And it varies from country to country, and it varies from department to department in the organization. And in doing that, we're taking out the excess. The value depleting layers we are removing to become, one, more client-centric, more focused on our clients, and more value added in every intervention, whether it's a TA, a technical assistance, or a capital project. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. Daphne Ewing Chow, senior journalist at the Cayman Compass. My question comes from a fairly unique standpoint, being the Cayman Islands, which is a more high-income Caribbean country, British overseas territory. I was wondering, in this type of unique context, what kind of priority would a country like the Cayman Islands be in terms of putting out scarce resources, especially now during all of these issues around the region and the world? And also, how do you assess the unique development needs of a high-income country like the Cayman Islands? And that's for any one of you, really.
My team is so kind. They always let me go. Thank you for that question, Daphne. You know, again, in St. Kitts last week, I had the honor of meeting with your premier, and we had quite, and our director of projects was there. We had quite an excellent discussion. Cayman is a high priority for the Caribbean Development Bank. And why is that? One, as you mentioned, you're high income. Yes, you also have very high credit. And there are resources that we have as a bank that we believe will be quite attractive to Cayman. We've mobilized resources in the climate space. We know that Cayman, for instance, is vulnerable to climate shocks like the rest of the region, but also because of the topography of Cayman, it is highly exposed. How do we harden the infrastructure in Cayman? How do we harden the beach and coastal areas in Cayman? We have climate resources that we have mobilized that can serve Cayman very well. There's also the matter of human capital development in Cayman. How do we treat with our youth and young people? We know Cayman is not unlike other Caribbean countries where we have challenges with our youth and young people. And there's a disturbing statistic which I'll share with you. We touch on youth unemployment in the region frequently. But what we have discovered at the bank is an acronym called NEET, N-E-E-T, not in employment, education, or training. 24% of the region's young people are not in education, employment, or training. That's a quarter almost, 1 in 4. How do we reach them? You know, how do we make, we know that youth in Cayman, for instance, also see moving to other countries outside of the Caribbean, even after they have been educated in the region, as a path for which they can grow and raise a family. How do we cause them to stay, such that, as we said, talent isn't our greatest export? So we have resources in both the climate space, but also in the youth development and capital, human capital development space, that regardless of the income level of our countries, we think will be a benefit to our born member countries.
Thank you. And my second question is to Mrs. Isaac. I was just wondering, obviously this has been a really interesting year, with the US basically pulling out of the whole climate discussion effectively. How has that impacted the bank's priorities? Have more resources been shifted in that area to make up for the shortfall with the US pulling out?
Thank you. One of the things that we've recognized is that the change in landscape really reinforces our need to remain focused on delivering tangible benefits for our client countries, our foreign member countries. You heard the President mention that we have been actively increasing concessional financing. We've also been, I mentioned the project preparation facility that we had got operational, and that is to help our countries have projects that they can readily submit for financing. So what we've really done, yes, ODA resources and for climate finance have been reduced. However, what we've done is basically double down on the resources that we have. We've mentioned, I think through all the presentations, you heard us talk about being catalytic. And so again, we're using the capital we have available to us to leverage and join more private and public sector capital. So that is the focus that we do. We're not being sidetracked by other things happening. We're trying to ensure that we make the best use of what is available to us. The President talked about deepening partnerships and strengthening partnerships. So that is the route that we're taking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't want to neglect the journalists that are online. So we will now go to Mr. Dennis Chabral of Demerara Waves online. Dennis, what is your question? You're muted, Dennis.
Yes, my question basically amounts to somewhat of a follow-up to one asked earlier. I wanted to have a little more precise answer. How soon do you think Caribbean people will begin to feel the impact of the Iran conflict and cost of living and the tourism arrivals? And what can be done to mitigate such impacts, if any?
Jason, I think that one is squarely in your court.
Dennis wants a date.
So Dennis, I can assure you that if I knew the answer, I would get the Nobel Prize. I think there are a lot of moving parts, Dennis. There are a lot of moving parts in this scenario in terms of the cost of living. Let me give you a practical scenario. When there were shocks at the beginning of 2025, in terms of the first set of announcements in terms of the tariffs, at the end of the year, global prices or in deflation rate, there was still inflation, but the pace has declined, right? And that was related to the response of the various actors in the system. So similarly, what we have seen is as you've said, global commodity prices go up. But there have been announcements as soon as this morning, which suggests that the situation is extremely volatile. So to give you a date would be unwise of me. But what I can assure you is that there would be, if it continues to manifest in this way, there would continue to be, and we'll have to monitor the situation closely. That's the best I could give you. And we are monitoring the situation closely.
Thank you, Dennis. And to our guests from the media in the hall, we're asking you please to stand when you ask your questions. Thank you very much.
Isola Alfred, senior journalist, Helen Television Systems, St. Lucia. We have several borrowing countries who are doing away with their Cuban medical programs out of fear or to win favor. What is the expectation and measures put in place for any increased borrowing for health expenses?
So, thank you for the question. I mentioned that our strategic plan was approved in February 2026 to 2035. And for the first time in quite some time in the Caribbean Development Bank's history, we have actually included health as a sector that we would intervene in. Now, that's not, I need to be measured when I say this. This is not to say that we're going to rush out there and be, building a lot of hospitals, et cetera, because right now, we don't have that expertise, the medical expertise within the bank to supervise these types of projects. So that comes then to the matter of deepening partnerships. On let's take Barbados, for instance, and this is one of the reasons why we stress that health needed to be included in our strategic plan for the next 10 years. Barbados has consistently been pretty high in global NCD tables, pretty high. So for Barbados and some of our other Caribbean countries, health is actually a developmental issue. And as the region's sole indigenous multilateral bank, we can't turn away from it. So to your question with Cuban medical practitioners perhaps exiting the region, this will or could certainly become, again, like Mr. Cotton mentioned, we are monitoring all of these situations, but it could become a developmental issue. And as the region's development bank, we are here to support our countries, and it would be a matter of how they come forward to us and how we engage with them in our country engagement strategies. Outside the strategic plan, each country has its own CES, country engagement strategy, and if they capture within that the health concerns or the health sector or challenges within the health sector, then we will seek to respond, whether directly or through partnerships. Thank you.
And you did mention in your 2026-2035 strategic plan that it rests on 3 pillars: social resilience and economic resilience, as well as environmental resilience. Mm-hmm. There was a mention of a commitment of a 30% climate financing target and then 35% in 2027. Can you tell us what are the investment figures attached to the social resilience and economic resilience portion?
So when the president gave his first address, we did an assessment of the gross financing needs of the Caribbean to achieve the SDGs. And the estimate that we got was alarming. The figure that the president highlighted was about just over 65 billion. So now that would be across all of the SDGs, right? So that would be social, environmental, and economic. And in addition to that, it said that if there's a shock, as we're seeing several shocks, the president didn't indicate, but that figure goes up to around $72 billion. So that would be across all 3 dimensions of sustainable development. And I think it's important to look at it like that, because the 3 dimensions are interrelated and interconnected. So the economic dimension, particularly in the Caribbean, where we are dependent on resource endowments, is related to the social and the environmental. So I think looking at the bigger picture is a more complete way.
Thank you. I'm going to actually read a question which was posed online, and Mr. President, I think this one is definitely for you. How are you more strategically and prudently funding from capital and other instruments apart from debt?
So thank you, the online viewer, for the question. We have within our pool of resources, and I mentioned that we are undertaking a resource mobilization strategy for the bank. But the matter of partnerships to catalyze resources can't be overstated. So I'll give an example. We are now one of only 7 entities globally that has been accredited to the MCDF. Now, what's the MCDF? It's the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Financing, which is perhaps the youngest global multilateral financing outfit in the vein of the GCFs and Adaptation Fund and those. What's different about MCDF, though, is that it is entirely grant resources, and it is focused on cross-border initiatives in 4 areas: ICTs, transportation, water, and energy. So the fact that CDB has become accredited to that means that we can now mobilize grant resources to move to our countries to develop human capital, to develop capacity building, to develop institutional strengthening, and importantly, to do critical design work on major infrastructure projects. The other point I would want to make on how we treat with financing without using debt is one I spoke of before, which is the contingent recoverable grant for Nevis geothermal, which is fabulously innovative in that we provided $1 million to Nevis, and then another $16 million that is contingent. Now, if it becomes, the project is successful, only then it becomes debt. But in the absence of that, it remains a grant. So we are supporting our countries developing the natural endowments with very highly concessional resources. And I'll just close perhaps this response by speaking to the fact that last year, our shareholders replenished our special development fund to the tune of $460 million US. Now, that's highly concessional financing with extremely long tenors, which makes a very minimal impact to the overall debt overhang of countries. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And staying with our online journalist, Mr. Jules Vasquez from Channel 7 News in Belize will pose the next question. Jules, welcome. You're muted.
Are you able to hear me now?
We are.
Okay, excellent. Hello, good morning. Jules Vasquez from Channel 7 in Belize. If I could just ask 2 questions and fold it in one. President Best, I heard you speak about the importance of involving youth. I haven't heard it a lot. I haven't heard a lot of discussion about crime. And I have not heard a lot of discussion about engaging youth, because you know that brain drain, to use the simplest term, is one of the greatest problems facing the region. You alluded to it, you know, that our greatest export is the human resource. But really, the issue is that we are unable to offer jobs or environments that offer adequate compensation, or work environments, especially in the public sector, in which people are properly insulated from the normal political tribalism that evolves in small economies. So that's number one. How do we create an inviting environment for highly trained young people who have invested in their education, their time, and their families' resources to work in a suitable space that they find economically and rewarding in a professional way. That's number one. And number two, would you speak a little about projects in Belize? I know there had been, it's sort of going up again, but what areas of interest particularly does the bank see in Belize? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Jules. So I'll take the first one, and then I'll invite our director of projects to speak to the matter of projects in Belize. Jules, I have to tell you, when I walked in the room, I looked around because I'm accustomed to seeing you present. I'm a little disappointed that you didn't travel to Barbados this year. Jules, look, on the matter of youth, we can quote statistics. We can speak about the fact that 85% of violent crime is committed by youth between 16 and 26 across the region. But this morning I want to talk about real people, if you would allow me. And I want to speak specifically about the Youth Economy Project in St. Lucia, one in which we intend to roll out to some of our other board member countries. I want to speak about a young lady whose name is Arissa Dennis. Arissa is a 25-year-old entrepreneur, Jules. And she is the proud owner of Pure Hydro Farms in St. Lucia. And through a grant from the Youth Economy Project that we are financing, incidentally, she is one of 1,080 young people in St. Lucia that receive grant resources. And her business is focused on producing sustainable vegetables in St. Lucia. Through that business and through the grant that she received, she's now able to expand. She has expanded her product offering to include beets and tomatoes and other fresh produce. I also want to speak about one that is very close to my heart, a young lady by the name of Shanique Ellington in Jamaica. She is the proud owner of Le Champ Cosmetics. Le Champ is a Caribbean vegan cosmetic brand that she has created. She received a grant through the Grow and Go aspect of our She Trades program that we're doing in connection with the International Trade Center. With that grant, she was able to expand the digital offering of Le Champ Cosmetics, including an AI chatbot on her website, but also, and this is the part that I really love, she has included an innovative shade matching tool on her website for all skin types and colors. Now, she came to CariFesta 15 and she was able to secure three retail postings in Barbados, 2 in Jamaica. Trinidad and Cayman are currently pending, and in the summer of this year, she will do a UK launch of Le Champ Cosmetics, all through the grant. Yes, you can clap for that. So I'm telling you, this is what Shanique Ellington is doing, and there are more. I could speak about Coyote James, also in St. Lucia, a visually impaired 30-year-old young man who has a real 3D printing business, and through a grant for the in the Youth Economy Project, he's been able to get more equipment to expand his product offering. Now, here's the thing. Youth need opportunities. The fact that we have the Youth Economy Project in St. Lucia, the fact that She Trades we're on to She Trades 2. We've just recapitalized She Trades for 2026 to 2028 with just under $3 million. This needs to be scaled. So when I speak about scaling, this is what it looks like. So when you ask the question, Jules, about how we're impacting youth and young people, this is what it looks like. These are real people doing real positive things with their lives, but also transforming their economies where they are. To do that, you need money. You need concessional financing, and you need capital and human capital support to help train them. And this is what the Caribbean Development Bank is doing, and we intend to do a whole lot more of that across the region. Thank you, Jude. You want to speak about the projects?
So
The projects that we're doing in Belize, just to support what the president is saying, the bank, in terms of youth, our approach is to deal with the core challenges that impact poverty. And so we have a very strong education project program, and there are several education projects that we've done over the years in Belize. But we also are working with the Belizean government to do specific projects. So there are two, the Youth Community Transformation Project, which was approved in 2012, and the Youth Resilience and Inclusive Social Empowerment Project, RISE, which was approved in 2016, are examples where we would have designed projects specifically targeting youths that to complement the work that we're doing in education, in MSME, and the work in BNTF. So generally, our approach to tackling this problem is tackling the root cause that would empower and improve the skills training for young people in all our member countries.
Thank you, Jules. And we will move the focus back to the in-house journalists.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Chester Robards from the Nassau Guardian in the Bahamas. Just wanted to ask, I know Mr. Cotton talked about improving support for ourselves in the region, and we talk a lot about expanding trade throughout the Caribbean, as well as inter-Caribbean travel, connecting economies within the Caribbean and us becoming some of our own best tourism customers. I myself also, I have to fly past my island tomorrow to get back home, right? So, so what's the bank seeing in terms of improvements in these areas? And are you seeing people come to you, individuals or even countries, to try and solve this problem within the region so that we can help each other grow our own economies? I was happy to see OK from the Fraxum Bank here. I know they raised their cap limit for the Caribbean to $5 billion. And even just improving trade with African nations as we're talking about that.
Yeah.
So the bank is trade. Let me say, I would deal with the aspect of the question and speak about trade. And you know, I spent a lot of time speaking about the importance of growth as an imperative, and the need to improve trade within the region is one of the catalytic forces that will contribute to growth. And in that trade discussion, the bank has been doing, and I'm kind of stepping into a little bit of projects. Thanks to the director of projects, is better known, but you know, we've been doing a lot. There's one bank, President tells us it's one bank. We've been doing a lot in terms of supporting foreign member countries in terms of their airports, in terms of their seaports, in terms of road connectivity. And essentially, these are the pathways that would help to boost trade. And as well, the airports would also assist in terms of connectivity, right? Then there's the other aspect of flights, etc. But the bank is actively engaged in those areas. Let me stop there and allow my colleagues to.
Yeah, no, I would just, that is absolutely spot on. I just add, of course, the fact that we launched a trade finance guarantee program. We designed a trade finance guarantee program in partnership with IDB Invest and JP Morgan. And why did we do that? We did that to provide guarantees to commercial lenders, thereby reducing the risk to them of financing entrepreneurs and MSMEs involved in the trade space. We talk a lot in the Caribbean about the excess liquidity, right? I think the figure is somewhere around $7 billion, excess liquidity. And governments say, the commercial banks need to do more. Entrepreneurs say the thresholds are too high for borrowing. Commercial banks are saying, or commercial lenders rather, are saying that the projects are coming forward not fully baked, they're too risky. And here we are sitting on the sidelines with a AA+ rating. So what have we done? We've brought our AA+ rating to the game. right? And we've said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to provide you commercial lenders with a guarantee. That reduces your risk of providing financing to them. But also, because your risk is reduced, we expect a lower rate to also get to these entities involved in trade. And so we expect now for there to be more movement interregionally and internationally within the trade space by virtue of our guarantee.
Hi, Karina Bennett again from the Jamaica Observer. So the other question that I have is largely in relation to what I saw in Jamaica or what we've experienced in Jamaica with Hurricane Melissa. So many Caribbean countries are still carrying heavy debt loads. Mr. Cotton, you spoke to about 9 member states still having over 60% debt to GDP ratio. And we're seeing now with all that's happening that it's strengthening arguments that more loans are not necessarily the answer to our problems, right? So I just want to get a better sense from the CBD as to whether this question can go to whichever one of you that you think is relevant to. Whether the CBD think concessional windows and climate fund access are adequate for the scale of adaptation now required with what we're seeing weather-wise, and if not, should Caribbean countries be prioritizing other forms of financial instruments or strategies moving into 2026 and from 2026 moving forward? Whether these could be like disaster clauses, catastrophe bond, parametric insurance, and so on, as was in the case of Jamaica when we had Hurricane Melissa and that payouts where we see that it really helped us.
Valerie, would you like to field that one? And then President, I'm sure you would want to come in.
Thank you for your question. The bank is very cognizant that risk transfer instruments like the CRIF parametric insurance really is just one type of tool that the BMCs have within their DRF toolkit, because various countries have different types of instruments. And we're aware that the type of vulnerability or to shift to the sort of long-term vulnerability that instruments like the parametric insurance need to be paired with things like the land use plan and your building codes, being more prepared. So there are several sort of policy actions which need to be part of the toolkit, early warning systems, etc. We have several instruments that we support. And one of the things that the President may have mentioned, you may have heard the President mention the multi-donor climate, the multi-donor resilience.
Debt swap.
Yes, the multi-donor debt swap
facility, yeah.
Right, for resilience. So there is different tools that we've been sort of investigating or working with our partners on to not just focus on loans or further debt, but to focus on some of the more proactive type of interventions that borrowing member countries need to adopt to help reduce risk. I'll let the President talk more about some of those.
Yeah, thanks, Val. So, perhaps we could just touch on two that are very important to us right now and also very innovative. Every borrowing member country of the Caribbean Development Bank, I think I'm not speaking a term when it has an allocation from the Green Climate Fund of a readiness facility that they can draw on to prepare projects, as the case may be, right? For increasing resilience, for whatever they determine. But what if we can pool these resources to then scale, whether it's in the energy transition, whether it is in building more climate resilient homes? What if we can pool these resources to design more projects geared towards adaptation and mitigation? Well, we don't have to consider what if anymore. At the Caribbean Development Bank, we have launched, in conjunction with the Green Climate Fund, a regional readiness facility, the first of its kind globally, where a number of our borrowing member countries, I think we're up to 6 or 7 now, have committed their readiness allocation to the CDB. So currently the pool stands at just north of $10 million US. And what we intend to do with this pool of resources is design projects that can be scaled, right? Again, without impacting the debt burden. What Ms. Isaac was speaking about just now, also the multi-guarantor debt swap facility. This region is not unfamiliar with debt swaps. Bahamas has done one. Barbados has done 2. As a matter of fact, the most recent one being, of course, the water reclamation, South Coast sewage treatment plant one. But what we're doing now is a multi-guarantor debt facility where the Caribbean Development Bank, together with the Inter-American Development Bank, the Latin American Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean, or CAF, and the World Bank, have come together to create a multi-guarantor debt swap facility where essentially, and they tend to be fabulously complex, but in very simple terms, essentially, we will buy down the debt of countries, provide much more concessional financing for our countries, right? For the debt that is currently on their books. And they determine what debt they want to put into this facility. However, the magic happens in that savings, because you had this debt that was pretty expensive. You know, receiving that is markedly lower in terms of interest rate. What do you do with that savings? Well, with that savings, you actually undertake development projects. In the case of Barbados, of course, it was the South Coast treatment facility. In the case of Bahamas, I think it was coastal. Where Barbados, the first one for Barbados was coastal. So now what we're trying to do, not on a country-by-country basis, but what if we can create a regional multi-guarantor debt facility? And that is what we're working on now, to provide development solutions without impairing the debt overhang of our countries. That is where our focus is. Thank you.
Okay, I have a second question, and this is in relation to a conversation, a regional discussion that happened, I think, late last year, where former Minister of Transport in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Devant Maraj, had put on the table that there should be a regional discussions about the introduction of environmental levies, or what he called a blue tax, on Caribbean on cruise operators to address marine pollution and protect Caribbean waters. I want to know, first of all, I think Ms. Isaac, you spoke to, 1 second. A $200 million regional blue economy program that I'd like to know a little bit more about. But I also want to know if what's the CBD stance on that blue tax suggestion that was put forward by Mr. Maraj.
So the blue economy program that I spoke about is actually under development. But it's really intended to support a whole suite of adaptation and mitigation actions for both private and public sector. And from the various consultations, there have been 6 or 7 areas that have been identified, focusing, for example, fisheries and aquaculture, marine technology, waste management, including the whole issue of the circular economy, and of course, protection of coastal and marine areas. So demand, we figure that demand for activities under this program will ultimately determine the sort of actual investments that materialize under this program. So it's really actually quite new. So it's in the early stages of development. And I'll let Jason speak about taxes.
So the question has many dimensions because what you're speaking about is the introduction of a new tax and the suitability of that tax. So, you know, whether new taxes are introduced, you would have to look at, you know, the specific country's tax mix, their tax to revenue ratio, and generally what we tend to advocate first is for improvement in efficiency or compliance rather than the introduction of new taxes, because new taxes could have other adverse implications. Now, with that said, I did say that the Caribbean region is, we depend on our natural resource endowments, which means that in our sun, our sea, our sand, our ocean resources, these are very important to us, and we need to ensure that we are balancing the utilization of those resources with ensuring that they are sustainable over time. So the point I'm making is that, and before I wrap up, I just wanted to say that we've seen internationally a trend towards the introduction of these taxes. The UK and Europe introduced the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism tax, which is a tax essentially on fertilizers, etc., which impacts predominantly in the region exports from Trinidad and Tobago. So we've been seeing these new taxes. The bank, I don't think we had to make an utterance in terms of whether the introduction of one tax or another is important. I think that is within the jurisdiction of a sovereign state. But what we're advocating for is the need to balance the need to utilize our natural resources and the sustainability of those resources over time.
Thank you very much. I think we have a question from online, and this is Mr. Julian Rogers of Caribbean Bridges. Julian, over to you. You're muted.
For Valerie Isaac. In light of the damage done to Jamaica by Hurricane Melissa last year, how has that changed the bank's reaction to disasters such as that? What lessons did you learn from last year, and what are you ready to deal with in the upcoming season?
Thank you. Hurricane Melissa, as I said, really reinforces for us the need to work more with our countries on what we call the proactive type of interventions. So we already support some of our countries with, for example, their CRIF premiums. We've been talking about supporting them with developing some new instruments. I mean, the President mentioned some. However, we realize that the early warning systems is another area that we realize that we need to work, well, not realize, but that we will continue to work with our countries on. In fact, in summary, I mean, it's really important. The preparedness aspect of building resilience is really, really important. And we understand that in addition to the preparedness, also we strengthen some of our instruments to help countries with the recovery aspect of it. So along the whole chain of disaster risk reduction, there are several areas that we have, we've determined that we will continue to work with our countries on to reduce some of the vulnerability associated with some of these storms.
Thank you very much. I'll just have a last call in-house. If any of our journalists have a final question.
Good morning, Deanza Roberts, the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, CBC. I think my question really was answered, but I'll still ask it. In terms of infrastructure, how concerned are you that building codes are not kept in terms of how people build? Because we keep seeing these hurricanes and stuff like that. So in terms of infrastructure, you're concerned, and any advice for the region? Thank you.
Our Director of Projects will take that one.
Question. I think you've identified some of the core issues that we need to address in the region in relation to what Valerie was just speaking about, being better prepared for the storms. The situation in terms of building codes and the enforcement of those building codes vary from country to country. In jurisdictions where they exist, they are oftentimes not enforced in a way that actually makes them effective. The bank, we've been working with CrossQ to help to put in place or update the regulations and the codes that are a little bit dated, and to find more effective ways of implementing, of making these codes more effective across the board in our member countries. In addition, we are helping with the core work. We currently have a study with, I think it is CIMH, which will look at the rainfall intensity curves, which is what design engineers would use. They would use to help with prepare better drainage facilities and better road infrastructure, better flood mitigation infrastructure. So we are looking at this from a root cause point of view, and we are dealing with the institutions, with partners in CARICOM and the individual countries to see how we could strengthen this aspect. But until this is fixed, we will continue to have problems, challenges in the region. And it applies to all aspects of infrastructure, from households, from household billing codes, to road infrastructure, to transport infrastructure. Everything has to be done, not only to withstand the risks that portend today, but as projected due to changing climatic conditions moving forward.
Thank you very much. And we are, of course, aware of time, but closing question, which was posed online by Mr. Fitzmore Peters. The strategic plan calls for expanded private sector engagement to drive growth. Private sector lending carries higher default risks than sovereign lending. Is CDB's balance sheet strong enough to absorb potential losses from riskier private sector investments? And what's your appetite for risk?
I guess I'll take that one. Thank you, Mr. Peters, for that question. We are intensely proud and protective of our balance sheet, as you would have seen from the recent Fitch ratings assessment of the Caribbean Development Bank. Not only did it reaffirm, of course, our AA+ rating, but it noted that even though we are rated as AA+, we are capitalized at AAA rating. So the strength of our balance sheet is unquestioned. Just one peek behind the curtain. We monitor something at the bank called our risk-adjusted capital. It's a risk-adjusted capital ratio. And to date, it is at the highest it has been, certainly in recent memory for the bank. So even with our initial forays into the private sector, we will not in any way impair the bank's balance sheet. And how will we go about this? Well, we have, for instance, supported equity investors who will lend to various businesses within the region. But even that process undergoes an extremely stringent appraisal within the organization to ensure that there is no compromise on who the funds are going to. I feel the need to close perhaps with another example in the private sector, because in conversations like these, it's important to anchor everything we say in real people, right? We can't become so intellectual and focus on what we call development imperatives and use acronyms that only we understand and forget about the actual people. So I want to speak to what we are doing in our Creative Industries Innovation Fund as an example, which is focused on our creatives, focus on the private sector aspect of the creatives within the region. And last year, we provided a US $100,000 grant. So again, grant resources will not impair our balance sheet. They're not market facing. We provided a US $100,000 grant to a young man, Derek Drayton, a Trinidad and Tobago national, who is the proud owner of Native Photo Inc. Now, you see all of these types of images that we have, and when we do our PowerPoint presentations, and in the corporate world, we tend to use a lot of photos. Majority of them are drawn from stock imagery from the internet, from some space, some entity that is extra-regionally based, not Caribbean. What Derek has done is creating a stock of Caribbean photos for us to use in the region, in our presentations, in our interactions, etc. And he received a grant from the Caribbean Development Bank to grow his business, and he is doing just that. Now, this is a real example of how we as a bank are interfacing with youth and young people, how we are supporting private sector growth, how we intend to scale, and most importantly, how we're doing all of that without impairing the credibility and viability of this storied institution. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we close this morning's proceedings, let me thank our speakers. Mr. Daniel Brest, President of the Caribbean Development Bank. Mr. Jason Cotton, Acting Deputy Director of Economics. Mr. O'Reilly Lewis, Director of Projects. And Ms. Valerie Isaac, Division Chief for Environmental Sustainability. A special thank you to the members of the media. The work of building resilience and securing Caribbean futures cannot be done without you. We value your partnership as we pursue this critical mission together. To everyone who joined us in person and online, thank you so much. Now, the conversation doesn't end here. It continues on our social media spaces, in your newsrooms, and in communities across the region, wherever Caribbean people are confronting the realities and possibilities of our collective future. And know this, CDB will always be part of the solution. God bless the Caribbean, this region we live in, work for, and love. Thank you.